Hello everyone. Yeah, I think there's some problem with the previous link, so I'm starting here itself. Just give me 1 second to set it up. Yeah, I hope you're able to hear me. Just give us 1 second. I will start sharing it. Great. So we have, what do we have right now? Okay, I see a couple of people joining in. Hello. Hello, Uncle. It's great to see you. Just waiting for a few more people. So hi, Ruchi. Yeah. So yeah, while we wait for a few more people, I think I'll just talk about a few things, and as in when people join in, we can start working this thing. I think the scheduled link, there is some problem, so I just opened it on my phone directly. We'll have to figure out how the Facebook on desktop would work for a live session, but that's okay. We can do it here. So first of all, I hope you guys are also having a good weather. Being from Bangalore, obviously we are privy to some good weather out here. It's both sometimes sunny and very windy. But at the same time, great weather, at least here. Thing it is erratic a little bit, which is a thing. And second of all, I hope you guys were all watching the solar eclipse that happened in the morning. It was fantastic. I mean, as someone who just loves watching the skies, or just in terms of astronomy and all, it's just something I've been very excited for. In fact, I kind of had this session in mind because it was luckily coinciding with this, with the date itself. As you know, like, in Indian mythology, the idea of solar eclipse happens because Rahu is supposed to be eating the sun, and because he's severed from his neck, the sun escapes again. So we were lucky that after the spectacular sun eating, the sun came out again. But as we have discussed, and we have, what you're going to be looking at is this idea that while Rahu was able to swallow the sun, there have been a lot of people who had tried to reach for it or try to get close to it, and they had their own issues when they did that. So we're going to be talking a lot about that. So the first things first, before I talk about we get into a topic. So this is the 6th session of Mathematical. I guess it's now become a regular thing for me, something that I look forward for, and I'm so glad for you all to be turning up in this session. And we've been experimenting a little bit with obviously different themes. As I mentioned, we're going to be looking at coming up with new series format and all. We had last week we had Mathematical Meetup, which turned out to be a lot more fun and engaging and all than I think I could have imagined for. Not only was it just informative from a sense of like, just talking about different things about mythology. I think what was really fascinating was to get to meet a lot of people, and thank you all for the reception, the positive and the warm receptions I've been getting. We will be doing a mathematical meetup sometime soon again. It's something that I'll try to keep in between and all. So the idea of starting this session, the idea of having this session was also the idea of trying to go back to some of the stories that are well known, but in terms of what do they mean to us is something that I wanted to explore, and at the same time bring up another story. I think one of the things I always want to do with mathematical is not just talk about the stories that are known, but talk about a theme that is known, that is common across different mythologies, and then try to look at the same mythology we knew in a different light. So that was how that's how I thought about it. And given that it was a solar eclipse today, what better topic than to talk about sun itself. So yeah, so mathematical, for those of you who are joining in and are not aware of the sessions and all, mathematical has started in collaboration with the Cobalt Blue Foundation. Cobalt Blue has been doing some amazing stuff in mythology, storytelling, art, and in therapy also. You guys should definitely check out their Instagram page and the Facebook page and all. And I mean, the idea was also myths is something that should not be only meant for a certain type of people or only meant for an academic approach. It's something that has to be seen by a lot of people. But one of the things that I personally feel is that myth has become a little more static in terms of people finding something to listen to, people trying to find this original source, or they're trying to find what exactly happened, which is sometimes missing the point, because myth has always been evolving, which gets me to a very important topic before we actually dwell into the stories and all. The different levels of myths itself. If you think about myths, right, myths are stories in many ways, and in some ways they're also things that push us. They push us, they induce a sense of wonder, but in sometimes and in many cases they're also a statement of warning. They are the thing that try to humor our curiosity, but they're also heeding to our caution. They are trying to tell us something. Now, because of that, I don't think myths are themselves prescribing. It's a bit of a misnomer if we start thinking of myths being a caution, myths providing caution, or myths providing a warning, as that they're telling you something. I think of it more as it's a descriptive, phenomena of myths than the prescriptive phenomena. They are trying to show you something. They're trying to show you something about human condition. They're trying to bring out a cultural truth. They're trying to bring out an experience that has been going on by the by our society, by our by civilization, and that's what they're trying to bring out, and they're leaving it to you actually to decide on how and what you want to take out of it. Which is why, we as humans will definitely try to bring our own this thing. As a storyteller myself, I will try to talk about my interpretation of it. But I think at every point you should be aware of the fact that the stories are meant to be taken the way you want them to take it. Yes, there are certain ideas and there are certain historicities within any of the stories, especially in terms of trying to figure out what the where the story came from. It's very important to understand the context of a story, which part it came from, when did it come and all, because those also have an effect. But at the same time, in the end, no one can give you a very clear definition of what myths mean to everyone. Everyone has a different different societies had a different interpretation of myth itself. People have contention with the term myths also, which is another topic, and we'll be talking about that soon. But having said that, I wanted to just bring the point that myths are something that are doing a lot of things. They're telling stories, they're warning, they're showcasing certain things, and it's up to us how we take it. So without further ado, we can now, I think we should get into the topic. I see a lot of people have joined in. There are almost so there are a lot of people now. So we're going to today talk about this peculiar myth. Since we were talking about the sun and we were talking about this idea of heeding a caution, about this idea which is about someone being warned to not do something and then them doing it. Especially this comes out very interestingly in many myths, where it always comes out with someone, being told not to go for the sun, and then the person goes for the sun or goes around the sun, near the sun, and then, having some sort of a result. So there are three stories we're going to talk about. The first story is actually something that I think a lot of people know about the stories. It comes from the Greek story, the story of Icarus. And this is actually probably the most famous one that has actually given the term, the adage term that, don't fly too close to the sun. Generally always taken in terms of, having your ambition in check. But at the same time, there are, some more layers that we can unpack and all. So I'll begin the story now, and we will discuss about, what it could mean and all after we do the stories. So the first story, the story of Icarus. Now, while the kingdom of Crete was celebrating the death of the monster Minotaur, its own king, King Minos, was very angry. What should have been a moment of celebration, what should have been a moment of happiness, was overshadowed by the sting of betrayal that he felt. He knew that the only way Minotaur could have been defeated was by his own architect and his own inventor, Decius. He's the one who had created the labyrinth and the maze, which kept the Minotaur in the center. And he is the one who had helped the hero, he had helped the hero who had vanquished the monster. But that's a story of another time of how that happened and all. So he had actually ordered he was so angry with Daedalus that he had got Daedalus and his son Icarus imprisoned on the, in a tower where there was nothing but a sort of a window through which sunlight would come in the morning times, and in the night the only light source was a few candles that were put around in the corners. Now Icarus would spend most of his time looking out of the window, looking at the birds flying about, wondering when he'll get to this thing. Icarus himself was punished because for being a son of Daedalus, but also because he had helped his dad in this treason. But his father was always busy, even in this prison. Whenever Icarus noticed that whenever there was some food ration that was given to them, his father would take some of the food and then keep it on the ground till some of the birds would come in, and then he would collect some of the feathers that had fallen down and then go back to where he was working. And this something he strangely did this for a long time. Days went by, and he noticed that Daedalus was even getting very impatient. He was, at times he wouldn't even just wait for the bird to drop his, some of the wings and all. He would just take the bird and tear off the wings and then go back. So one day he asked, "Father, what is it? What are you making?" He couldn't really make it out. All he could see was some sort of a mechanical contraption that was there. His father just, dismissed him, saying, "You'll see. Just can you pass me the candles from the candles and some of the cloth strips from our robes?" Icarus just went around doing whatever his father did. Most of the time, Icarus won't really think too much about it. He would just stare out the window, look at the skies. He was just very fascinated by the idea of, how the birds were flying and all. But a few days later, in the middle of an afternoon, when Icarus was just sleeping, he got startled and he was woken up by his father's, crazy laughing. It's done, Icarus, come quickly, and try this on." Icarus hurried quickly to his father, and he noticed what his father had made. He had glued all the feathers together with the wax and then made some sort of wings. That's what it looked like to Icarus. And the underneath of the wings, there were these cloth strips, series of cloth strips that were just kept there. "Father, is that what I think it is?" Icarus asked curiously. "It's marvelous." Yes. There's no time, Icarus. We need to go now, Wear this quickly like this. And Daedalus showed the father how exactly to wear the contraption by slipping his arm underneath underneath the series of cloths, and then having the wing, almost as if like it looked like the two men had wings itself. Icarus followed through and he began to flap his arms. As soon as he did it, he got lifted off the ground and then he fell down again. He tried again, and this time he kept flapping, and he noticed he was flying, and he was just so excited. He was flying. He was like levitating. Like, father, can you see this? I'm actually flying. Daedalus says, I know. But you got to listen to me. We must jump from the tower, and straight we need to get out of this island and fly towards Athens. You must follow me. He was just cut short by Icarus just whizzing across the room, going wee sort of thing. And Daedalus got angry and he just screamed, Icarus, you insolent boy, just can you listen to me? You must fly. You must understand this. You must not fly too close to the sea, because the wax will get the wings will get moist. Nor should you fly too close to the sun. Like, yes, father, I get it. Can we go now? Can we go now? Icarus cut him short. Daedalus just sighed and he's like, okay, let's just go ahead. And then both the son and the father flew up and perched up on the windowsill itself. They could see the whole island of Crete and the sea that was stretching out with the glistening sun that was shining above them. Listen to me, Icarus. We need to make it to the Athens by flying east. But remember, do not stray. Do not fly too low to the sea, nor too high to the sky. I know, father. Not to the sea, not to the sky. Icarus just cut him short and then just wanted to just jump forward. Daedalus stopped him. For a second, he thought of trying to warn him again, but then there was not enough time. He told him to just follow him, and both of them took a dive. At first they were falling, and then with a sudden movement they started gliding, and they were just gliding away and away. Icarus was right behind his father's tail, and he looked behind, when he looked down, he saw the island completely shrinking off. He was so excited. He was actually flying. He laughed with a sense of wonder and joy, and he looked forward. His father was a little ahead of him, but every time he kept flapping his wings, he noticed that the islands were getting smaller and smaller. And at one point, the father, while ahead, was way below. And he noticed that, he was, at some point he started noticing the clouds. And then he was like, oh, what if I go above the clouds? He flapped his wing more and he went above the clouds. And then he could see the sun. For all its beauty of the sun, he never had experienced the sun this way. And the simple warmth and all was something so great that he, for a second, had forgotten what he was doing. He heard his father screaming something, but there was a lot of wind and he couldn't understand what was happening. And then he kept flying, and then he noticed a bird, and then he was trying to catch up to the bird, and then he noticed that the sun was becoming bigger, and he just was mesmerized by it. But then he noticed something was off. One of his wings started feeling off to be a little lighter. He looked around and he noticed that some of the feathers were just falling, and the trail of feathers were just falling down beneath the clouds and just falling into the sea. All the wax that was there was melting because the sun rays were getting stronger and stronger. Out of panic, he ended up flapping his hands even more, but all that caused was more of the wings to keep falling off. And finally, he noticed that he was falling himself. He screamed for his father, but nothing could be done. Daedalus was looking at this. He saw his son fall down very fast. The speed at which he was falling, even falling on the sea, was almost like getting slammed onto a slab of granite. His sorrow for the fact that his son, what had happened to his son, was much more than the anger that his son had not listened to him. Despite all the planning and all the perseverance and all the ingenuity of his inventions that he had built for the tool of his escape, he had not counted for the fact of the trappings that are human mind and human recklessness. He saw his son finally die, and the place where he fell down became an island that was known as Icera. So that was the story of Icarus. I hope you found that interesting. Sorry, I'm seeing a lot of questions. Just one second. Hello, Mr. Vidyasagar. Yeah, I did share. Yeah, so we have a few people joining in. It's great. See, the Ashwin. Hi, Ashwin. Yeah, so great. So we have a few more people joining in. So as we spoke about, we've covered the story of Icarus from the Greek mythology. The story obviously has a lot more angles and a lot more character motivations. I did not get too much into that. But just to tell you, like, Daedalus was also known to have been so arrogant in his inventions that he had actually pushed his own nephew, who was a rising inventor himself, away from the cliff. And when this, his nephew was falling down, Athena took notice, and just because she valued human ingenuity, saved that this nephew by making him into a bird. And then she cursed Daedalus, saying that the way you just, your arrogance, you have so much arrogance about your own inventions, and the way you pushed your, your own family, that is how you're going to see your own family die. And that's the reason that the little bit of a backstory where Daedalus finally got what he was cursed with. So that was the story of Daedalus. Now, I'll come to the other story. Now, this story may not be very well known to a lot of people. This story actually is coming from the Chinese mythology. To be honest, I haven't done too much of Chinese mythology in up till now. I'm going to try doing more of this Chinese, Japanese, and some of the other mythologies that we don't tend to notice it. I think we also, as a human, have a tendency of being biased about certain ideas of what mythology is. Some of us, we only think of Indian mythology, and we don't even acknowledge or like the other mythologies. For many of us, mythology just by extension becomes the Greek, the Greek, Egyptian, or at the most a Norse mythology. But the thing is, mythologies have come from different places, and they all have some sort of a thing, and they kind of depict, or they talk about what the culture valued itself. So this story, a story of Kuafu, comes from the Chinese mythology, and it goes as such. So there was a vast mountain in the desolated plains in the north, and in the mountains lived the giants. They were led by Kuafu, who was the grandson of the gods of the underworld, and he was the one who was named the leader of the tribe. The giants were generally a very strong but a very kind, and lived a very simple life. They weren't very aggressive. They didn't get into too many wars or battles and all. So the leader Kuafu, his stature, he was someone who was very tall, very muscular. He's also someone who was able to run very fast. He was able to run faster than a rabbit in the mythology, and many times he would also help his tribe survive certain beast attacks or any sort of resolve any conflicts and all. In fact, he was so strong and so brave that he would even wear two snakes as earrings. And he had a cane in his hand that he used to keep carrying. One day, Kuafu is sitting on the slope of a mountain, and he notices that the sun is about to set down. And it gave him an idea. He asked that what if he could just keep the sun exactly where it was, so that there's always a light in the world forever. Won't that be great? I mean, who wants the night? I mean, whenever sun is always there, it will be a great idea. So he decided that if he captures the sun, that would really be helpful. But when he told this idea to his tribe, they were like, "Don't even think about it. The sun is too far, and you will die of fatigue." Some of them were even, telling him that, if he goes too close to the sun, he was going to get burnt alive. But Kuafu was very determined. He was 100% sure that they're just saying this right now. If he really tries to if he gets the sun, everyone's going to love him more. After all, he was a leader, and he liked being admired, and he wanted to do something nice for his community. So the next time the sun rose, Kuafu bid farewell to his tribe, who were still trying to stop him, and he started chasing the sun along with his cane. Now the sun was realized that Kuafu was chasing, and like a naughty child kept pouncing around and running away, ensuring that Kuafu was never able to catch up. Kuafu still raced through the land. He gushed like a breeze, and he kept running around and chasing the sun through and through. The sun was trying to rise even higher and higher while trying to run away from Kuafu, but Kuafu was almost about to try to catch it, and the sun kept trying to escape its clutches and all. And it came to a point where the Kuafu was almost reaching near, and he was sweating, and then he realized that he was feeling very, very thirsty. He was this thing, and then for a second he took a break. He leaned on his cane and he just took a break, and he realized that, okay, I'm just I need to have something. And he looked around and he found the Yellow River, the river that flows in China. It's a very important river. He looked at the river and he decided to go put his foot, put his face inside, dunk his face inside, and drink up the water. So thirsty he was that he ended up drinking the full river dry. And then he started running around again, and the same thing happened where he was almost reaching the sun. He started feeling sweaty, and then he started feeling thirsty again. This time he looked around and he found the Wei River. There was another river, and then he just ended up consuming that full river and drinking it dry. The third time he almost was reaching up. He almost got the sun, but at again he was almost dehydrated, and then he decided to go for a lake. He found a lake, and he just he completely just submerged himself, drank it, and then started chasing the sun again. But this time something weird happened. He noticed that his legs weren't moving too much. So much of water he had drank that at some level his body was becoming more and more heavier. He tried to move as much as he could, but the more he tried to move, the more his body kept getting stuck to the ground. And at one point of time he tried to reach for the sun, but then because of the weight of all the water and just the sheer pressure that he was going through, he just fell forward. As he kept falling forward, he took his cane and he threw it at the sun. The sun, obviously it missed the sun, but it fell a few kilometers away from him. And he looked at the sun. As the sun kept going down the west, the last rays of the sun fell on his face. And finally, when the next time the sun came back up again, Kuafu was no more. He had turned into a mountain. So much of water he had drank, and so heavy he had become that he became one with the earth itself. And the cane that he threw was turned into a peach orchard that became something that a lot of people coming forth would come and enjoy the fruits or have the quench their thirst before they would go on. Kuafu's attempt at trying to get the sun was unsuccessful, but his attempt at when he threw the cane, his reason of throwing the cane was because he wanted to ensure that anyone else, whoever tries to reach for the sun, at least is able to find the nourishments so that they can continue on his journey and finally defeat the one thing that he was trying to chase. And that's the story of Kuafu. Kuafu, is the legends itself is supposed to have become a mountain. Now the name of the mountain changes in different myths. In fact, in some of the stories, this is one of the myths that do not have a one clear version. The idea of a mountain is one version. Another version, he actually just dies of starvation. In another version, he almost catches the sun but burns himself off. But then again, I mean, that's the thing about myths, and that's the thing about stories itself, right? So that's the story of Kuafu trying to chase the sun. That comes from Chinese mythology. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, the idea that they both this thing, Icarus and Kuafu, they both were warned. They both tried something. So we are seeing some similarities. But I think I'll talk about the third story, which is something that I think a lot of us know. We have heard the story a lot. In fact, it's coming from the Mahabharata, and this is a story of Sampati. So this story comes from the Hindu mythology, especially Ramayana. Though it also finds its mentions in other it finds its mention also in Garuda Puran and a lot of other ones. Many of us know the story only from what we've read about the Ramayana a little bit. have a backstory also of what exactly happened and all. The story goes that Sampati, the king of the birds, lived with his younger brother Jatayu in a forest, and they were the children of Arun, the charioteer of the Deva Surya. Surya is the sun god who would streak across the sky. And since they were a little hatchling, they had found sky to be their playground. Often in competition, both of them would soar really, really high to the dizzying heights, much to the dismay of Suryadev. Suryadev once even told Arun, you must tell your children not to fly too close to us, unless they want to get burnt. Arun tried to warn his children, but his instruction would just go unheeded. Don't worry about us, father. Both the birds would shout back while they would continue flying around. And this upset Arun a little bit, but secretly he was so, he secretly marveled his children just flying across how splendid and majestic they looked when they were flying across the sky, that he kind of let his warnings be ignored. So one day, in the spirit of this contest, Jatayu challenged his elder brother, Sampati, to race the mountain. Never want to back down, Sampati agreed, and like both the brothers decided to rise higher and higher. This went on for a while, and after flying a great distance, Sampati began to feel a little tired. He started wondering where his brother is. Is he feeling the same thing? But not wanting to stop, he decided to just go, he decided to glide forward. Perhaps with the same thought, Jatayu did the same, and both of them continued the race. Sampati started feeling the air becoming warmer and warmer until it started becoming blazingly hot. His throat was parched, but both of them were too high up to see any water below them. He looked at Jatayu, who just whizzed past them. Haha, brother Sampati, I'm not going to let a little bit of heat and thirst, stop you from beating you. But it was then Sampati realized that something was wrong. Both of them were in the path of Suryadev's chariot, and the increasing heat along with the sound of the sun horses drawing the chariot meant that the Surya was very near. Jatayu, wait! But Jatayu had flown too far to be in the earshot. Far apart, Arun, their father, had noticed this too. The thing is, if he realized that if he tries to stop the chariot, the whole balance of the universe will be thrown off and it will affect many lives. But if he didn't, Jatayu was going to be trampled. If only his son had listened to him. Resigning, he continued on his path, making peace with the consequence of this situation. The Surya chariot was dangerously close, and so blinded was Jatayu by this competition and this need to win that he only noticed what was happening just then. But suddenly a figure came in front of him, pushing him away. Dizzy by the hit and thrown off far away, Jatayu just turned in time to see what had happened. Sampati had stepped in front, taking the full onslaught of the heat wave to save his brothers. Sampati, no! But it was too late. Smacked by the solar wind, Sampati's wing had completely been scorched. While being trampled by the chariot, he was knocked unconscious, and he kept falling far, far away. Jatayu was also knocked to actually chase after his brother at that point in time. Sampati fell into Mount Mahendra, and he was unable to move for a long time, groaning in pain until Rishi Nishakar found him and tended to his wounds. Both the brothers never met again. And it was only during the events of Ramayana when Sampati heard a few monkeys mentioning Jatayu's name that he got to know what his brother had done and how he met his end. That is the story of Sampati. So I hope you guys enjoy the stories. I'll just take in some of the questions that were flying in. I see one question. So I see Anuruddh has given a song. That's true. Chasing the Sun was actually the reason I chose the name of the title, because it just I think I've played that song a lot of times during this week. Your other question is, how many mythologies have a heliocentric view of the solar system? To be honest, I think that's the thing. I mean, mythologies don't have a heliocentric thing, because most mythologies coincidentally were written by people who saw Earth as the main center. Having said that, if I mean, there have been few interpretations where at some level, I would say something like the Norse mythology, which doesn't talk about planets, they doesn't have this, but they have the concept of realms. They have the 9 realms, and Earth is in the center of the realm. But at the same time, if you the way they talk about it, it is something that I personally felt comes the closest to the idea of, like, this Yggdrasil, the tree that goes around, and the sun. But then again, that is just some, there's just one type of an interpretation. To be honest, I don't think there's any mythology which actually makes it seem like, sun is in the center and all. I think that, Copernicus actually kind of, discarded a lot of mythologies, and like, kind of insulted a lot of gods when he proposed his theory. But that was the stories. I hope you all enjoyed the stories. I'm pretty sure you've heard some of them. I want to talk about a few things, so if you have the conclusions and what it meant, sort of a thing. So it's very interesting, right? I mean, all 3 stories have the idea of someone not listening, and then finally, like, facing the consequences. And at one level, definitely it's about unchecked ambitions. But I want to talk about the different types of ambitions that do come out. So I'm going to just talk about this one important thing. Are you able to see it? This is always a question. I hope you're able to see it. Just please message if you're able to see this. So yeah, so the main thing I want to talk about from these stories is the part about recklessness. I mean, it's very clear that all 3 stories had something happening. There was some sort of recklessness. But the thing about recklessness as a sort of a reaction is very interesting. If you look at the story of Icarus was motivated as he just wanted to sense he wanted to have a sensorial experience. He loved the idea of flying, and at some level he was so attracted by it that he just wanted to achieve something. He wanted to do something for himself, which is why his the way he was motivated was just because he just wanted to do something and he wanted to achieve it. Now Khufu, on the other hand, was interested in showing his this thing. He loved the idea of being able to control the sun and then showing it. He was also looking for approval. He wanted a sense of people to like him. He wanted to get the sun in a way to benefit humanity. It was this idea that that was driving him, the concept of glory, the concept of coming, doing something for people and all. And that also meant that he did not listen to a lot of people, and then met his untimely demise. Sampati's story, the recklessness actually comes by Jatayu, and Sampati is the one who ends up saving him, and his motivations are for altruism. So if you think about it, all these ideas, the idea to the concept of reaction, as the recklessness or reaction, all these stories happen in a few moments, right? They just happen. If any of these characters really got to think about what was happening to them, they would realize they may have done something different. But the thing is, sometimes what you do as a reaction in a certain moment kind of defines not just what will happen to you, but who you are as a person. Yes, I mean, it's a great idea to be able to think and to able to have very rational things, but it's what we do in certain moments, what we do as a reaction, what we do when we are, when we get attracted to something or we get scared of something, that really defines us. So the idea that, this idea of unchecked ambition, right? It's something that I want to understand, I want to talk about, is that yes, it's a bad thing in many ways, but to be honest, it's also something that creates situations for people to rise up to the occasion and be heroes. Does that mean we should always be reckless? No, I don't think that's the answer. That's what the stories are trying to say. The stories are trying to show that how these moments are the ones that make us who we are. Because if you think about it, heroes are not people. It's not the hubris. It's not this ego that makes someone a hero. It's actually the helping nature. What Sampati did is something of a cautionary tale of what can happen, but it is more of a cautionary tale for Jatayu, and Jatayu regrets to live this tale. He at some level he's motivated to help the Sita and all out of a sense of obligation, but also because he realized what a sacrifice his brother had done. Comparatively, if you look at Icarus was not really thinking about so much. He was not someone who thought this through, or he did not even try to absorb what his father was telling him. At some level, he was just so excited of achieving something, or he just trying to get something done, that in some ways his father also is to be blamed, that was so focused on trying to create a contraption, he didn't make it foolproof. He did not realize that how certain things can happen. And that brings to the other point. Many times a situation comes where our reaction, how we react to it, becomes a more important thing than the situation itself. Take for example the COVID situation. There is a lot of caution happening. There is a lot of caution. I mean, anyone who listens to the scientists, we should have been listening to scientists. People are still moving about. People are still getting out, because in their head, the short-term gains, the economic ambition is so high that they're not really able to see the caution and the result that's going to come to us. The part that is scary is not the fact that what will happen to them, but their recklessness. This idea of doing something because it will make a short-term impact is something that's going to affect a lot of people. COVID-19 is actually something that if one of us is not careful, we will affect a lot of other people. Which is why we have we have people trying to fight it, we have people who are trying to convince it, and we have people who are trying to save them, and they themselves sometimes have to face the consequences. I mean, we've heard of stories of doctors who have very bravely been trying to cure people of COVID and all, and they themselves are suffering because someone else was not careful themselves. And this is what is very important to understand. I think the way I see it is that Icarus is the people amongst us who have who tend to venture out without a sense of care, without wearing the proper attire and thing. The idea of Kofu is basically the way we think of business right now. The idea that we must do something because that's what will make everything better, even though there is enough warnings to be cautious and to avoid that, especially in terms of the fact that the numbers are the number of cases are increasing. So now is not the time to be doing things or trying to get situation back to normal, if normal is there, even something that we can achieve again. And Kofu meets his demise. He tries to do something because he thought it would this thing, but it doesn't bode well for him. Nor does it change anything for people. And Sampati has to do something because someone else made a mistake and he had to pay the price for it. So that's the story. That's the moral of these mythologies. I wouldn't go so far as to say the moral, because I don't think myths are trying to tell us something very, very explicit. They're trying to be implicit in their stories. They're trying to just show us what happens, and they're trying to open conversations in a way that will help us decide what we want to do. So do we want to be people who are reckless, or do we want to heed to cautions? And if someone ends up heeding to cautions, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to let them meet their demise or fall for their doom, or are we going to stop them from getting harm, so as to send a message for the future for others and set an example of why this was not something that had to be done? And that's a thought I would want to leave you guys with. So that's the end of the session so far. I am open to taking up questions if any of you have. Any other questions or any things you want to say and add to this? Yeah, so till you, we'll wait for a minute or the thing for any other questions to come in. Um, but yeah, I think all these stories, they have, I mean, they have been interpreted many times, and they've been used as tales to warn and all. But I think what's important about these stories to remember is that recklessness has always been a part of us humans. You know, it's not something that's going to go away. We are going to react. We are going to make impulsive decisions, and how we choose to go about it, how we choose to behave before and after it, how we choose to, take even the idea of heeding caution, how we choose to take caution is going to be is going to tell us a lot about ourselves. So yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, if there's any other questions, feel free to put it on the comment. I'll even take it up after the session ends and all. I do hope you all enjoyed the session. This was something that was very interesting for me also. We've known these stories for a long time, and I think with this thing with the sun, solar eclipse today, it was a great idea to be talking about the sun. Maybe we'll have a new appreciation for the celestial body, and at the same time about what that means for us as humans to be doing. Thank you, everyone. Until next time, I'll be back with some more stories, interpretations, and fun content for everyone. See you. Bye.